Um, let's try that again. Okay, second attempt at doing this. I had a wee technical problem with the first one. So what I'm going to be doing on this run is talking about PZB, mostly signalling alongside it, simply because the two kind of do go hand in hand. And this route we start with quite a long wait at the first station, which gives me a chance to sort of explain a couple of things and get the cab properly set up. So we start with, you'll see there's a red signal up to the end there. We've got a wee while to wait, there's a service coming in. So a couple of things about how I've got my game set up. First of all, I don't like these floaty bubble things in the middle of the screen, so I turn the objective marker off, turns it into a distance counter there. I have my signal distance thing turned on, but I don't have the aspect part turned on, so I know where it is, but I never know what it is till I'm getting closer to it. I just think it makes it a bit more realistic, a bit more challenging. And the speed limit change thing here. This is information that the driver would have. Line knowledge is a big part of these guys' sort of skill set. And these screens that we don't get to use in the game often have additional information which is equivalent to what you see on the heads-up display. So, quick cab setup. First thing we're going to do, train line power on. And coach lights on, so the passengers have got some light. We will put the headlights to reduce. Now, safety systems turning on. There is the switch for CIFA, which is basically an alerter. Over here is part of the PZB system. It should be in mode O. Should always be in mode O for a passenger service. Talk a little bit about the other modes later on, and the fuse to turn it on is down here. So PZB and CIFA are both now active on the train. So you know PZB is on because you will see, first of all, above the heads-up display, this blue number appears, this 85, and you'll see these little blue lights have appeared down on this monitor here. You don't need to be able to read those clearly to understand what's going on. You just need to be able to make them out. So PZB is in mode O, which means that when PZB is on, we have a maximum speed of 85 kilometers an hour, and there are some other speed restrictions within there. Two modes that PZB runs in are unrestricted and restricted. Unrestricted is what it'll normally kick into when you're out on the line and you pass an active magnet. Restricted is when you are either setting off for the first time with PZB turned on, which we're going to do just now, or when you are setting off after being stopped while PZB was on in the first place. So if you've arrived at a station and there's a danger signal at the end of the platform, for instance, you would be stopping with PZB active. So when you start again, you'll automatically be put into restricted mode with a lower speed limit, 45 kilometers an hour in mode O. That's if you're under 1000 Hertz monitoring, which we'll come back to. The only other time you'll ever see restricted monitoring is if PZB has brought you to if your speed drops below, I think it's 20 kilometers an hour when you're in unrestricted. At the moment we are not in any PZB mode. It's not active at all. PZB is a reactive system, so what it's basically doing is when you pass a signal or a speed limit sign that's guarded by PZB, nothing will happen to tell you that you had to respond. What it's designed to do is make sure you understood what you passed. So if the signal, for instance, is showing caution or proceed with caution or anything other than all green, you have to press the PZB acknowledge button to tell the system that you saw that signal. You then have to slow down to the appropriate speed. The PZB speed limit is not always the speed you're going to be doing either. there are various speeds that you slow to for various signals. PZB is just basically to make sure you're not thundering on through without slowing at all. So we'll be leaving under restricted PZB monitoring, and then once we're underway we won't see PZB again for a little while, but there is quite a bit of it along this route. Whenever you're out, whether it's busy and there's lots of signals or whether you get greens all the way, there are still PZB things to watch for. Rule of thumb with a signal is if you see a signal that's anything other than clear, unless the signal head itself is telling you a new speed limit, then you assume 40 kilometers an hour and slow to that until you see all clear. There are a couple of other limits that PZB imposes on you with regard to signals. There are PZB magnets about 250 meters away from all main and 4 signals. If a main signal is at red, that magnet will be active, and when you pass it you have to beat an even lower speed limit, which I think is 35 or 40 kilometers an hour for mode O. So there's our signal just gone green ahead of us. You'll see the train just to the right there is arriving. So we just make sure all the brakes are off, reversers and forward, and we can get underway. What have I forgotten to do? Right, yeah, I forgot to turn this key off. Yep. Always forget that key. Right, so now the brakes are off. Come on, system, reset. There we go. So as soon as we pass 5 kilometers an hour, this light will start flashing between 2 numbers. That thing down there starts flashing. So that tells you that PZB is in restricted mode and your top speed is going to be 45. But because we have a set of points coming up, we're actually only going to be doing 40. So the signal there is telling me 2 things. The top part's the main signal saying proceed with caution. That's just to slow me down for the points, basically. And the bottom half is the distance signal for the next main one. And that's telling me that the next main one's all clear. So in other words, get across the points and then hit line speed. What you have to be very careful of is not to touch 45 kilometers an hour when you're in restricted mode, though. As soon as you even touch it, PZB will slam the brakes on. So there's CIFA coming on as well. The CIFA and PZB both work off of the same pad button, the circle button. So you will hear the noise of the PZB button being pressed a lot. So there we go. You just need to wait for the tail of the train to clear the points, and the line speed is now 100 kilometers an hour. PZB is no longer active, so we can just go for it. So CIFA will just come on every no more than 30 seconds between them, and it's if you haven't touched the train controls for a while, it's just making sure you've not had a heart attack, basically. So it's a fairly straightforward run to the next station, pushing it a little bit for time because we had to wait for that other train to get in, but we shouldn't be too bad. And then beyond there's some speed limit changes and things that PZB will come into play with, and then you normally get some yellows at the far end of the run. So always just give yourself a couple of kilometres an hour in hand. You don't need to run at maximum speed the whole way. So signal coming up is a 4 signal. That white plate with the black chevrons on it tells me it's a 4 signal, and it's telling me that the next main is all green. So there shouldn't be anything to worry about with PZB, but you do still have to watch because it might be a combination signal. In which case, although the main is green, the combination part might not be. But in this case, it's not a combination signal, it just has the... Oh, I've lost my throttle again. You sometimes lose power just going into that tunnel. So that's a main signal. You can tell it's a main signal because there'll be a red or a yellow coloured strip on the signal mast. Those should be the only ones that will ever be red, and those are the only ones that are referenced up here. So because that was only a main signal, I know that there is going to be a 4 signal somewhere between me and the next main one. They're usually at 1,200 metres. Sometimes they're a little bit further away, sometimes they're a little bit closer. Again, that's mostly a line knowledge thing. No impending speed limit changes either. Won't take us that long to get to Letmouth. So we'll just wind the speed in a little bit. If you've got a USB keyboard, you can plug that in and use most of the PC controls as well. So in fact, you can operate CIFA with the Q key and you don't get that annoying beep every time. It's just I can't always be bothered reaching over for it. So there we go, there's the 4 signal. Again, the little white plate with the black chevrons marks it out as a 4 signal. And it's just telling us we've got clear ahead. Sometimes you'll see the main signal and the 4 signal together on the same mast. Sometimes you'll see these ones with nothing on the mast but the extra little white light, and that's just to tell you that they're distant sort of repeaters for a main signal that's out of sight. So that's a combination signal we've just passed. Both parts are green, so clear main and clear ahead. Most of the route it's that it's what's called HV signalling, the 4 signal and the main signal, and then at the far end there's a few kilometres that use the K signalling system. More or less the same, it uses a slightly different layout of lights. It's the same rule of thumb though, if you see any yellow and no other speed information on the mast, get it down to 40. Sometimes the main signals and the 4 signals will give you speed limit information as well. So those are all clear. You'll sometimes see a yellow number below it or a white number above it. Yellow means the speed limit is changing to that after the next main signal. White means you have to be at that speed from that signal onwards. There's one coming up shortly. Fairly certain. There we go. Wasn't actually paying proper attention. If you're in any doubt about whether or not you should have acknowledged a signal, just press the PZB button. And if nothing happens, you were good. And if the 1000 hertz light comes on, just brake till you're doing 85. And you've got about 25 seconds to get down to that speed. So I mean, putting it into brake 3 or something like that on this particular train is enough. It's looking for you to do it on a curve sort of thing. So you don't need to just slam on full brakes and then spend the next 2 or 3 kilometres recovering from that. So we're still getting clears. But somewhere up ahead I think there's one that's going to tell me I've got a speed limit change coming up. There'll be a little yellow number 9 underneath it to tell me it's reducing to 90. Right, so there's on the heads up display the change is about 4 kilometres out, so it'll be shortly before we reach that. There, so there's the yellow 10 in fact, so it's going to do it it's going to do it in stages. Although the line speed is still 120 because we've been given an instruction by the signal. You have to kind of go with that. And there's no penalty for doing it. PZB, for instance, does not know that the signal is putting a new limit on, so PZB's not going to do anything. Likewise, CFAR, that won't concern themselves with this. And then you'll see the white 10 above the signal there. So the limit is enforced from here on. And as always, just give myself a few, couple of kph in hand. So we're going straight through this one. So we're still all clear on the signals, but I'm expecting to see a reduction to 90. There we go. There's the reduction for the next one. And there we pass the signal with the 90, so it's telling us that somewhere in this sector. There we go. So it might get a few more CFA alerts on the way in. PZB shouldn't come into play during this stop, but we'll hit it a few times on the way out. You can actually brake quite late in these trains as well. The brakes are pretty decent on them. And still all clear. You have to be careful as well when you've been braking in this train. You have to make sure you recycle your throttle all the way down to off before you apply it again, otherwise the safety cutout will still be applied. So we are going to pick the speed up even though we're only really a few hundred meters away because of that delay that we had at the beginning waiting on the inbound. So we'll just stop the throttle off there. And signals are still all cleared, so I don't need to be worrying about getting PZB or anything like that. It's a deceptively long platform here. It's easy to slow down really, really quickly and then realise you've got loads of way to go yet. I don't bother mucking about with the switches on this thing because they're a bit fiddly and a bit of a nightmare. So it won't be a very long stop here. See if I can squeeze the camera in there. Okay, so we're just about good to go. Brakes off. And off we pop. So there's a speed limit change to 80 up ahead. I can't actually remember if this one's PZB guarded or not. Guess we'll find out as we go through it. This is an express service, so we only make like 2 stops or something on the way. Just acknowledge CIFA. Lovely green signal ahead, and that will be a distant signal, a force signal, sorry. Oh, didn't want to put that in neutral. Silly boy. So, expecting clear ahead because the force signal said so. You can go from a clear force signal to a main signal being proceed with caution. So you do still have to kind of be half awake. Don't just assume it's going to always be green. You sometimes need to catch the acceleration as well with the dab of the brakes if you've been powering up to your line speed, which I am just because of the small time deficit we've got. So when there's a speed limit change coming up, look anywhere up to about 1 kilometre to 1,300 metres out from the speed limit change. You're looking for the orange signs that tell you about it. Those. Now, that was guarded by PZB, so I now need to start losing speed. And the computer needs to be satisfied that I will be below 85 kilometers per hour within 30 seconds. As soon as you're below 85, PZB isn't interested anymore. But we do still need to be down to 80 for the speed limit change itself. So once the 1000 Hertz light goes out, because we've seen a green signal, we can just release ourselves from PZB monitoring, and the system's quite happy with that. If we hadn't braked early enough, or we were braking too slowly, PZB kicks in, slams on the brakes, and you have to stop and reset the train. Total pain in the backside if it happens, but I still say it's much more interesting to drive with it all switched on. So we're now in the 80 kilometre zone. There's a further reduction to 70 coming up ahead. I don't think that'll be guarded by PZB because we're already doing below 100k. But again, if you're in any doubt, just press the PZB button. All you have to be aware of is keep your eye open for the orange sign. It'll be a little inverse triangle, coloured orange with a number in it. And that's warning you of the upcoming change. The white ones with the black numbers, or the black ones with the white numbers, are the actual speed limit change points themselves. When you pass a speed limit going up the way, you might notice that sometimes it takes a while for this little red pip here to change. That's because you don't actually start picking up speed until the whole train is past that the speed limit point. So we're still getting all clear signals, so we'll just ramp it up a little bit closer to the 88 to the line speed. SIFA again seems to be a lot more constant than the, for example, the alerter on British and American trains. So we're 1.7k away from the speed limit change, so we start keeping an eye on the line ahead for the little orange sign. Sometimes it will be stuck right next to a signal mast. So it's not in this instance, but there are points where you have to be careful when you're going through. Sometimes there is one point where it's hidden next to a signal, and you go through looking at the signal thinking, it's green, it's fine, I don't need to, there's the sign there. Now there was no magnet in the track next to it, so I don't need to acknowledge it. Yeah, it's really easy to blast through this one particular signal, I think it is, and I can't remember what direction you're going in when you hit it. But it's really easy to forget there's a speed limit change sign there and not to acknowledge it. And normally you remember it's there because the brakes have suddenly slammed on. There we go, not closed the throttle fully again, so close it all the way and then it'll work. We actually need to lose a few kilometers an hour, so just a short stretch of 70 for this this particular corner. SIFA again, it's usually SIFA that's making the noise. But we might get a repeater signal just around this corner. No, it's fine, we're going straight on to the main. If it had been much closer to the corner, there would have been a one of the repeaters with a little white light on it. And even more CFAT, we should be passing an 80 km/h sign as well. It's about halfway through this station, I think it changes. Ah, there's the repeater, because the main was hidden around the corner. But I'm not going to bother dabbing the brakes in. So, main signal clear ahead, so we can just get on up to line speed. And again, I've got no power because I keep dabbing the brakes and forgetting to close the throttle completely. Been mostly driving the Long Island Railroad lately, so I've almost entirely forgotten how to drive these things. So it's a wee while to the next signal, so you know you don't need to worry about PZB or anything like that for a bit. It is useful when you're driving the German route though to switch your units to metric for the game, because it makes PZB a lot easier to work with. So 1.7 from the main, but this is going to be the 4 signal, and it's clear ahead. It's slightly further away because there's a tunnel. Quite a long tunnel, in fact. I think this is the longest tunnel on the route. Just clear the CFA alert. Again, USB keyboard, cost me a £5 from PC World, makes all the difference with this game. Didn't actually buy it for this game, but turned out to work with it, so that was a bonus. But yeah, if you've got a USB keyboard, plug it in, you can play this more or less the same way as the PC guys do. Doesn't support a mouse though, I did try. That said, I think I do prefer the pad for the working the brakes and the throttles and things like that. But the keyboard is much easier than using these clicky draggy things for certain stuff. And again, that beep's just me pressing the CFA button on the pad rather than the keyboard. So you get the PZB acknowledgement as well. There are 2 other parts to the PZB system. There's the release button, which is that middle one down there. That is if you're in restricted mode and you want to release yourself, and it's safe to do so, you can. And the one on the left is the override button. There is a single place in the entire game that you will use that. What have I just done? Okay, that's odd. That's why you shouldn't mess around with the PZB controls, kiddies. There is a single place where you will use the override function, and it allows you to pass a red signal. There is one circumstance where you get yourself on a freight route into a situation where you have to approach the red without having passed the yellow first. And it lets you get past the 50 hertz magnet without banging on the brakes. If you fuck around with it while you're driving at high speed, it bangs on the brakes. Because you're only supposed to use the override in low speed situations. You're not supposed to use it to go blasting through mainline signals, ever. So now, I've got even more time to make up. Fantastic. The speed limit is increased to 90. Should maybe have done those other buttons at the start of the video when I was sitting still, huh? Never mind. Okay, so another speed limit change coming up. I don't think this one's guarded by PZB either, again because we're under 100 already. But we'll keep our eye out for the sign coming up on the right of the track, and for a magnet track side as well. It could be hidden next to this signal. Yes, it is. You can see it just there, and there are magnets, so we'll acknowledge them. They are in fact on, so we need to get down to below 80, 85 rather. As soon as you're below 85, PZB isn't interested anymore. It's up to the driver to then meet any further speed restriction. So that'll stay on for about 700 meters or so. And once the 1000 hertz light there goes out, and the yellow thing there disappears, then you're no longer under monitoring. So the 1000 hertz light's gone out, 85 is still flashing, so we're still being monitored. We can now release ourselves though, because we saw a green signal up ahead. We know the track is clear, so there's no reason for us to be under monitoring. By the same token, I didn't really have to release myself there though, because I only need to do that if I want to go above 85 kilometers an hour again, which in this instance I didn't. So that would have switched itself off after a fixed time anyway. But it is useful to know how that you can override it at that point. And if for any reason the system decides no, you can't override, it will put you back into 1000 hertz monitoring. So, running even later because of my my little mishap with the PZB. In fact, we'll use that one. So we're not going to be here for very long. Literally just stop and go. You have to wait for the passengers to load, unfortunately. You can't do a southern rail and just shut the doors and bugger off early. So I don't think, what have we got down the line? We've got a green and no speed limit change. So I don't spend a lot of time outside the cab when I'm using PZB is the only thing. And you really need to be concentrating all the time when you've got all those systems turned on. Well, once the doors are locked, the thing in the top left will change. Okay, let's get underway. So these are kind of cool. You're driving from the cab end of the train up here, but in actual fact, it's being pushed along by the electric locomotive at the back. And yet, when you drive, the controls and even the way the train responds are completely different when you drive it from this end than when you're driving it from the other end. The acceleration's a lot more gentle when it's being pushed, which it kind of has to be because physics and stuff. But the braking system works differently at the front end than it does at the back. I don't think there is AFB in this cab at all. Whereas it's always switched on the locomotive end. But it's cool because it means that driving the train one way is a completely different experience to driving it back the way. It is like having two completely different units. So next stop Plettenberg, and then that'll be the end of the route. There will be some signals coming up, certainly beyond Plettenberg. PZB will be a factor again before we're done. In fact, I'm maybe going to run just a little closer to the limit than I normally would as well. So again, distance signal, or the force signal rather, telling me that the main is clear. Oh yeah, if you do want to use a keyboard, by the way, Shift Enter and Control Enter will turn on the alerter and the driver safety systems on most trains, rather than mucking about with switches and knobs. I'm not sure what the buttons are to change the PZB mode if you're in a freight train though. Sometimes if you start a freight service in one of the electric locos, it starts in the wrong PZB mode. But the button's easy enough to find. It's down the corridor behind the cab, and it's huge. CFAT again, and still clear with the signals. We're a couple of minutes late, so I wouldn't expect to be closely following any traffic at this point. But as we get towards Finnentrop, I expect to see signals. In fact, if you run late enough, you can bugger yourself up because oncoming services ahead of you get released, and you just cause yourself all sorts of delays. It's not the best view from the cab. on the route, but then again they designed these things deliberately to keep the driver's attention focused ahead rather than admiring the world go by. So there's a number below the signal there, an 8. Now because it is a significant change, we acknowledged it by PZB. So the 8 tells us the limit is 80. We're already below 85, so we don't need to worry about getting a PZB popping off on us. Now that's the signal. That's one of the signals it's easy to blast by, because you see that it's green, and you forget that it took me a couple of times to realise that speed limit change was actually guarded as well. Because of course you're looking for the little orange triangle with the magnet next to it, aren't you? That one should not need acknowledged, but I did it anyway, just in case. And there you go, PZB's turned itself off after a while. Just realised we've gone clean through the station as well. Too busy talking about PZB. Right, fortunately, now there's a signal in the way, I might not be able to go back. What a donut. Okay. Dearie me, that was awful. I've never done that on one of these videos before, I don't think. That's why I don't always talk so much either. God, tube. Oh, magic, right, I've got a red ahead of me, which I might not be able to get out of now. Which is a problem. Let's see what happens when we lock the doors. That might be the end of it there, a bit prematurely, unfortunately. Did cover most of what PZB is about and the basics of, you know, as long as you remember the basics with the signals. If you see yellow, acknowledge it. If you see a speed limit change, acknowledge it. If you see any yellow on a signal and you do not see any other speed information, then 40 kilometers an hour until you, oh for fuck's sake, 40 kilometers an hour until you see a green one. Right, I don't think it's going to let me go, to be honest. Right. Okay, so I've got a red signal now. And I don't think I'm going to get past it. Nope, I think I've buggered everything up by going back through that signal. Unfortunately. No route available. Right, we'll see if we can get past it with the override control pressed. Nah. Right, well, sorry about that. As I said, I was too busy gabbing about PZB and not paying enough attention to the line. At least it wasn't a PZB balls up that ended that for me. That would have been really embarrassing. Anyway, that was a little bit about PZB and signalling on the Ruhr Signord. I'll maybe do a little bit more about signalling and safety on some of the other trains at some point. But, yeah, sorry again, and thanks for that. Cheers.